At Cape Coast Castle in 1722, the end of Bartholomew Roberts' crew was written as a list. 72 death sentences, 52 men hanged, 20 sentences changed to labor for the Royal African Company. Other prisoners had one narrow path left. They had to convince the court they had not joined Roberts at all. The famous pirate articles were not on the table as a signed shipboard document. They were in the book Johnson printed 2 years later. What was on the table was harder to reduce. Witnesses, offices, shares, forced men, naval rewards, and a court deciding who had belonged. So the question is not whether Roberts had a code. The question is which structure can be proven. The code Johnson wrote down, or the working order exposed after Cape Lopez. Roberts enters the surviving file late. Johnson says he sailed from London in the Princess under Captain Plum, was taken on the Guinea coast by Howell Davis, resisted the life at first, and was later elected captain after Davis was killed. That election may be true. It may be Johnson shaping a story about pirate government. The safer point is narrower. By 1720, contemporary reporting already shows Roberts commanding armed vessels in the North Atlantic, taking merchant ships, forcing men from prizes, and threatening to destroy his ships rather than submit to hanging. A Boston newsletter extract printed later by Jameson says Captain Samuel Carey's ship was taken in July 1720 by a ship and a sloop under Roberts. The pirates stripped passengers and seamen, broke open goods, took powder, guns, cables, and valuable cargo, and forced several men from the ship. The same report records the phrase that matters here. If attacked by a superior force, they would put fire to the powder and go down together. That is not romance. It is operating doctrine. Roberts's fleet was built for movement. It crossed the West Indies, Newfoundland, Brazil, and the West African coast because it could do three things again and again. It could take cargo quickly. It could absorb skilled sailors. It could keep enough order on deck to move from one prize ground to another without dissolving. The article list Johnson gives is famous because it looks like a constitution. Every man has a vote in affairs of moment. Food and strong liquor are common unless scarcity forces retrenchment. Men board prizes by turn. Theft from the company can mean marooning. Weapons must be kept clean. The captain and quartermaster receive larger shares. Musicians rest on the Sabbath. Desertion in battle can mean death or marooning, but every one of those lines must be handled carefully. Johnson's 1724 history says the articles were taken from pirate information. No original signed Roberts article sheet is in front of us. No trial clerk gives us the full list as a surviving shipboard document. The list may preserve real practice. It may also be Johnson compressing testimony, hearsay, moral argument, and editorial design into a clean article form. The documents do not let us throw Johnson away. They do force us to label him. The better evidence begins where the fleet breaks. In February 1722, Roberts's ships lay at Cape Lopez on the coast of present-day Gabon. Royal Museum's Greenwich identifies pages of HMS Swallow's log as recording the sighting of Roberts's ship and the encounter on 10 of February. Captain Challoner Ogle had the Swallow, a 50-gun Royal Navy warship. Roberts had ships, men, guns, and experience. But he also had a problem every raiding fleet eventually faces. The same concentration that makes it powerful also makes it visible. Ogle's first move was not a heroic charge. It was separation. On the 5th of February, he found the pirate ships at Cape Lopez. The Swallow drew one consort away. James Skirm's Ranger followed what looked like a target and became the target. Once Ogle had Ranger away from the anchorage, Swallow could fight on better terms. Then Ogle returned. That is the first diagram of the episode. Not Roberts against Ogle, but a raiding network against a disciplined state ship. Roberts's ships worked when they chose weak targets, fast boardings, and the economics of fear. They did not work as well when a naval commander split one consort away from the rest. On 10 of February, Swallow came back toward Cape Lopez. Johnson gives the scene people remember. Roberts on deck in crimson damask, a red feather in his hat, a gold chain around his neck, pistols in a silk sling. This detail is Johnson's. No contemporary log page I have opened confirms the costume. Royal Museum's Greenwich repeats the passage as Johnson's description, not as a logbook fact. The log can say less, and that is exactly why it matters. Roberts was killed during the engagement. RMG gives the date 10 of February 1722 and describes him struck by grape shot. The common version says his crew threw the body overboard according to his wishes. That too sits in the Johnson RMG narrative layer, not in the opened log text. The safe reconstruction is narrower. The commander was dead, the ship was disabled, and the men left aboard still had powder, offices, habits, and fear. One trial detail answers. The crew did not become chaos at once. It kept acting through habit, threat, and office. Modern scholarship using the printed Ogle trial records notes that one pirate, James Phillips, went below with a lighted match after the action and tried to blow up the Fortune. Stephen Thomas and Henry Glasby stopped him. The testimony says Phillips swore they should all go down together. That testimony connects the 1720 newspaper threat to the 1722 defeat. Blow up rather than be taken was not just a dramatic line. In the powder room, it became a decision someone tried to carry out. But the ship did not explode. The prisoners lived long enough to become legal categories. At Cape Coast Castle, the case changed form. Before Cape Lopez, Roberts's ships had sorted men by usefulness: navigator, gunner, carpenter, quartermaster, officer, new hand, forced man. After Cape Lopez, the court had to sort them by guilt. The National Archives catalog preserves HCA 199-3 F189, a death sentence passed on members of Roberts's crew, dated 1722, within proceedings of Vice Admiralty courts in Africa and other colonial jurisdictions. The RMG account says the surviving crew were taken to the Court of Admiralty at Cape Coast Castle, a modern dissertation on piracy procedure. Working from the Ogle trials in Baer's edition of British Piracy in the Golden Age, says the court tried 165 suspected pirates in hearings that lasted 5 weeks aboard HMS Weymouth. Other counts vary depending on whether the writer is counting captured men, tried men, executed men, acquitted men, men dead in passage, or enslaved Africans and black men listed separately by the sources. That variation is not a flaw in the episode. It is one of the things the episode is about. Pirate ships had categories. Admiralty courts had different categories. Johnson's account gives a final accounting: acquitted, executed, respited, sent to servitude, sent to the Marshalsea, killed in Ranger and Fortune, dead on the passage, dead in the castle, and Negroes in both ships. That last category is brutal in its compression. It tells us the record can count people without giving them legal individuality. The Ogle trial machinery treated the crew problem in 2 steps. First, the court took the fact of being aboard Ranger or Fortune as the core proof. The dissertation quotes the prosecution pattern. Witnesses from Swallow testified about capture and resistance more than about individual robberies. Then the court held individual hearings to decide who was voluntary and who was forced. The bench itself belonged inside the same world Roberts had attacked. The dissertation identifies Captain Mungo Herdman of HMS Weymouth as president of the court, with naval officers and James Phipps of the Royal African Company among the commissioners. Cape Coast Castle was not a neutral island in the middle of the story. It was a company fort on the West African trade coast. The same commercial world Roberts's ships had raided supplied part of the legal setting that judges men. The witnesses also stood inside an incentive structure. Officers from Swallow testified against the prisoners. The dissertation notes their interest in the outcome because captured pirates could produce crown rewards. Ogle himself was kept off the bench, according to a later letter cited there, because he had captured the accused and had written the indictment. That exclusion looks like legal caution. It does not remove the larger pressure. The court was built by the same state, navy, and trading interests that needed Roberts's network ended. So the trial was not only a moral reckoning, it was an administrative repair job after a maritime threat. The question before the court was not, what kind of man was Roberts? Roberts was already dead. The question was how to process the men left inside the machine he had commanded. This is the midpoint turn. The first half asks how Roberts's crews captured ships. The second half asks how the court proved membership after the ships were already taken. That question is sharper than the code. A clean article list makes pirate government look legible. The trial shows the mess beneath the list: coercion, opportunism, length of service, office holding, testimony against shipmates, and the legal need to decide whether a man was a volunteer. The hearings show office. They show hierarchy. They show men trying to explain how they entered and what they did afterward. They also show how close pirate liberty could sit beside pirate coercion. The popular code begins with a vote. The trial asks whether a man had a choice. Those are not the same question. Some men claim force. That claim was plausible because Roberts's crews did force men. The 1720 Boston account names men taken from Captain Carey's ship under threat. Later trial discussions include new entrants and men who argued they had not freely joined. The court's problem was that force at the first moment did not settle conduct later. A forced sailor could later become useful, armed, paid, promoted, or trapped. A volunteer could later claim he had never been one. That is why the trial record is so valuable. It does not give us a clean pirate constitution. It gives us the practical tests the state used when the Constitution, if it existed, was gone. Did the man hold office? Did he take a share? Did he board prizes? Did he resist the king's ship? Did he have chances to escape? Did other prisoners identify him as active? Did he testify for the prosecution? This is where the famous articles in the court record meet. Johnson's articles say the captain and quartermaster received 2 shares, and other officers received graded portions. The trial record, through later scholarly quotation, says office could matter in the court's assessment. Johnson says officers were chosen by majority and could refuse. The court asked whether accepting or refusing office was optional. The exact list is Johnson's. The underlying issue is documented. Office, share, and choice mattered. A pirate order is not proven by the prettiest article list. It is proven by what survives after defeat, the questions a court asks when the guns are silent. The Johnson problem is not that his account is useless. It is that his account is too useful. It gives the viewer the kind of pirate society a viewer can hold in one hand. Numbered rules, vivid costume, bold sayings, a final scene. The records give a harder object. They give a ship log page, an archive catalog number, a trial count that changes by category, testimony about a powder room struggle, and a court trying to turn collective action into individual guilt. That is the myth vs. record beat. The popular story says Roberts's code explains the crew. Johnson's 1724 history is the source for the famous articles, and no open contemporary record gives us the full signed code as an independent shipboard document. The records say something narrower and stronger. Roberts's crews operated through voting, shares, office, forced recruitment, prize-taking, and discipline, because those practices appear again when witnesses, captives, and courts had to describe how the ships worked. The legend gives the code. The record gives the room, prisoners in hearings, officers giving evidence, commissioners asking who had chosen and who had been forced. Cape Coast Castle turned those answers into sentences. RMG gives the headline outcome: 72 death sentences, 52 hangings, and 20 commutations to 7 years of labor for the Royal African Company. Johnson's accounting gives 52 executed, 2 respited, 20 to servitude, 17 to the Marshalsea, 74 acquitted, and other categories for dead and black men aboard. The dissertation emphasizes 165 men tried. These are not identical numbers because they answer different administrative questions. How many were captured? How many reached trial? How many were convicted? How many died? How many were executed? How many were counted but not treated as defendants in the same way? A weak script would flatten those counts into one dramatic number. The files will not allow that. They were not made for our neatness. The court's own rhetoric framed piracy as an offense against trade. In Johnson's printed account, the president tells the condemned men that piracy was destructive to a trading nation because it cut off the returns of industry and the imports that made an island flourish. That speech may be printed through Johnson's source tradition, but the state logic fits the prosecution. Roberts's ships had attacked commerce route by route. The court answered through commerce's institutions: Navy, Admiralty, Royal African Company, Colonial Castle, Execution Ground, Indenture Contract. Ogle's reward makes the same point from the other side. RMG records that Ogle was praised in London, knighted in 1723 and allowed to retain pirate ships and residual treasure after obligations to officers and men. Anti-piracy had incentives too. Witnesses, captors, courts, and companies all operated inside a reward structure. That is not a defense of Roberts. It is the reason Roberts is a case, not just a name. For 2 years, his ships used shares, offices, votes, forced labor, and fear to convert scattered sailors into organized violence. The court that destroyed the survivors used witnesses, commissioners, hearings, and sentences to convert scattered prisoners into verdicts. Johnson wrote a code because a code is memorable. The trial records preserve the harder thing because punishment needs categories. The final image should not be Roberts in crimson. It should be a table. On one side, Johnson's numbered articles, clean enough to quote, dangerous enough to repeat without a label. On the other, HCA 199, the Swallow log, the Boston newsletter extract, the Ogle trial testimony, the death sentence at Cape Coast Castle. One side tells us how the pirate code entered memory. The other tells us what had to be proven after the ships were taken. Roberts did not become important because he was a pirate with rules. He became important because his crews turned rules, shares, offices, routes, and fear into an Atlantic machine that survived until a Royal Navy captain split it at Cape Lopez. The code is the document people remember. The system is the document trail that caught them.